Welcome everybody to the October Sustainability Commission meeting. We'll give people a few more minutes to filter in, and I'll put a kind of an icebreaker question in the chat. The topic today is focused on waste, and so the question that I thought we could pop in ideas is related to ways to reduce waste. There's the zero waste pyramid that kind of prioritizes different ways of reducing waste, and either repurposing or reusing things is kind of higher in the pyramid than recycling or disposing of waste. So the question is, do you have an interesting or unusual idea as far as something that you reuse or repurpose rather than recycle or throw away? So thinking about, is there something food waste related that you use in a recipe, or related to packaging or clothing, or if you have creative things that you do and you save certain things to reuse. We'd like to hear your fun ideas. I like that chopsticks idea. Valerie, are you able to share the slides so we can kick off the agenda?
Sure, just give me one moment, please.
Okay.
So while we wait for that, should we go ahead and call the meeting to order and do a quick roll call of commissioners? All right. So I'm Mia Blum. I'm the co-chair of the commission. So I'm just going to start with who I see here. So Jared.
Present.
Donzel.
Present.
Phil.
Here.
Ben.
Present.
Lisa.
Present.
Lisa, I saw you. Thank you. And I don't think that I'm missing anyone else, but if you are a commissioner, if you want to just pop off and announce yourself, that'd be great.
See Lisa's photo, just for the record.
She said thank you. She said she was present.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Everyone see the slides?
Yes. So I think we're ready with just the office updates.
sustainability, where we'll be diving deeper into topics of waste in terms of how we are pursuing waste reduction, diversion across the city, and how that aligns with actions in the 2019 Sustainability Plan and the 2024 Climate Action Plan. But before we get started on that topic, we'll share some updates from the office. We do have a new team member, Brian Barrett, who is a climate action specialist. He's not able to join us tonight, I don't believe, to introduce himself, but we do look forward to everyone working with and meeting with Brian in the near future. We also want to share that the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, with funding from EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, is creating a comprehensive climate action plan, and part of that process requires engagement across the region. This particular initiative includes all the jurisdictions that the Baltimore Metropolitan Council works with. So that includes Baltimore City and 6 surrounding counties, including Anne Arundel, Baltimore, Hartford, Howard, and Queen Anne's County. And I think Carroll is the other one. So we encourage people to complete that survey and stay up to date on that process. There is a live link that'll tell you how many people have completed the survey. And we want to keep folks up to date on how this process unfolds. As a part of the process, each jurisdiction will have a greenhouse gas inventory conducted as well. So we look forward to sharing future updates about that initiative with everyone. Aside from that, we have released our October 2024 newsletter, and so we encourage everyone to check that out. We highlight the Department of Public Works Grow Centers, the fall series for this year. So the next one will be on October 19th. We do have members from our office and our team table at each of these events to share information about our work. But there's also a lot of great information as it relates to protecting the city's watershed overall. Always interesting giveaways and just really good nuggets of information. There's also been some composting workshops that the Grow Center has been partnering with the Waste Diversion team at DPW, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And just as a reminder to folks, October begins our series of climate action planning, Commission on Sustainability meetings. And so this month we're talking about waste. Next month we'll be focused on transportation. And then in December, we'll be talking about climate action planning from the perspective of institutional leadership in that regard. And part of that would include a site visit to the Baltimore Convention Center, where one of our commissioners will be leading a tour of the facility and highlighting the work that the Baltimore Convention Center does. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and pass it back to Mia to provide any other general updates from the commission.
I don't think we have any other updates. We're just going to go right into the great program that we have for today. So I think we're going to talk about the connection of the plan and climate action plan to all of our speakers today. I'm not sure if that was Val or you, Ava.
Take it away.
Is there a way to make that bigger?
The screen? It's
Yeah,
full
I can't
screen on
touch-
my screen.
Okay.
Is anyone else having that issue?
You may be able to adjust it on your end, Spice, so that you can increase it through at the top right of the window. You should be able to adjust it on your end as well.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone. So just wanted to talk a little bit about, the overarching how the waste initiatives connect to some of our key plans in the Office of Sustainability. So starting off with the sustainability plan, there's a strategy about increasing the amount of trash that is diverted from the landfill and incinerated to recycling programs. So there has been initiatives to give out free recycling bins to all residents and to increase commercial recycling, conduct continuous deep engagement on what is recycled. So that's an ongoing effort that's going to need to continue to happen for quite a while. Education being a really key part of what we do. I do apologize, my battery is running low, so let me just quickly jiggle my adapter to make sure that it's plugged in well. So just give me one moment, I apologize. And sorry about that. So beyond, in addition to that, we have some other initiatives and some actions that are in the plan, but expanding waste to wealth initiative. So that's really taking what we have and recovering it and reutilizing it. That gives potential for other jobs and work communities to ensure the placement is in conditions that and underinvested neighborhoods. Then moving on to some additional things, the legislation and policy changes around reducing the waste stream. So there has been a bag ban in the city, as we all know, and that's actually been taken on by some counties around us as well. But also, additional things around beverage container deposits and so on that still have yet to be realized. In terms of the climate action plan, just as a little refresher, that plan is really building on the sustainability plan and other plans. So it focuses on the greenhouse gas emissions, but there is a good deal of greenhouse gas emissions coming from the waste sector in the city. So that's actually the third largest contributor and to our greenhouse gas emissions. So this plan is really setting the goals for 2030 to reach that 60% reduction in emissions. And then, again, just as a refresher, we did include some guiding principles in that plan to really center this around equity, to protect the communities and the natural environment, and just really make climate resilience something that's fundamental and centered in the city. But, in terms of things specific to waste, we did mention in there redesign, reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost and recirculate. So, that's a key part of what we're looking at as guiding principles for the city and its plans. So within the climate action plan, there are several sections. One of those is focused on waste, though sometimes there's a little overlap between a few of them. So some key priorities in the waste section were really building on the solid waste management plan that was passed not too long before the CAP was passed, the climate action plan. And that did include a zero waste section in it. So there's a lot of initiatives going into that we are just trying to build on top of. Focusing on reducing and diverting waste, by introducing composting specifically, increasing reuse and other means as well. Reducing the amount of waste, the water we use, using less energy to clean our wastewater, and educating the public about waste reduction. So you can see where these complement and add on to what was put into the sustainability plan and some other plans that we worked on. So there's actually, I'll go back and forth for a moment. There are actually 15 actions in the plan around waste. Some of them focused on municipal actions and some of them broader community actions. But as I mentioned, those key themes throughout them. But I just wanted to highlight one or two of those, and certainly if anyone has any questions about them, we can go a little deeper. There is more information in the plan, and I want to make sure to be respectful of everyone's time. But a few key ones in there are really around introducing citywide composting. Right now, we certainly don't have the facilities to compost take on citywide composting, but there are actions being taken by DPW to try to expand that and get funding together to do so. And there are also some efforts that are happening on a very smaller scale with composting. So right now, as I'm sure most of you are aware, we can actually drop food waste off at different centers in the city and at markets. Some universities are participating with DPW in some composting pilots. And we've submitted some applications to try to expand that to some municipal buildings as well, kind of as first steps towards that as the city is looking to grow its capacity. Food rescue programs are another big part of that. Rather than composting, if that can be salvaged and brought somewhere else, that would be, a very great asset to the city. So looking at how we can coordinate with NGOs in the city and others to potentially get more food rescue occurring. There are community waste leaders. There are some programs in place in certain neighborhoods, but we'd really like to see that expand, and that's called for in the plan. And of course, an emphasis on circular economy with local businesses as well. A really big one I just want to highlight here is it's waste, which is the W7, which is sustainable procurement protocol. So that's in the waste section because that was a big part of the discussions around waste. But certainly, as you know, with city procurement, that wouldn't only affect waste. That will also be something that is, a big task to take on. So there's already been some discussions happening, but that will be something happening over the longer term. But also we did make sure to include wastewater and water savings in this as well. And then, just supporting other programs, looking at opportunities to, when new buildings are being created, that there is requirements for sufficient space for recycling, composting, and material reuse, because that's something that isn't necessarily required at this point. And then, of course, collecting data, and processing facilities. As we know, for instance, with the incinerator, a lot of trash comes into the city from other jurisdictions. So, what is that actually doing in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, for instance? Is that, beyond what's being incinerated here, people bringing things to that facility, of course, is generating pollution here. And then reducing energy at the wastewater facilities. DPW is working on a few things, and there's bigger things that would be in the works that this plan calls for. So just a few quick considerations. We could go into great detail on this, but I just want to hit some of the high level ones. There's currently some things to consider around that are both positives and negatives. So, looking at the fact that we have limited capacity in our current dumps. So, that makes the waste diversion pressing because, we do need to reduce that and find other spaces for that. Composting, of course, is a great alternative. Certainly doesn't treat all the waste, but really can reduce what's going to landfills and incinerators. There is private trash collection and disposal, particularly for businesses and so on. As I mentioned, trash coming into the city as well. So that is, those are things that need to be considered in this. There is limited space in composting facilities currently. We are looking to, as a city, expand that, but that will take a little time. Of course, that goes back to the big piece of funding, which is always a big piece of any type of expansion or new initiatives. Wanted to note on a positive note there, the DPW actually has a zero waste team now. So that is great that we have some leadership in the city to really focus in on these initiatives. There are some great city programs happening in target neighborhoods like the Clean Port program. There's some work to be done on how we can potentially look at laws and policies related to food rescue programs. There are some things that are prohibited currently. That certainly might be something that could be looked at moving forward. As I mentioned, procurement is a big piece of that. How we're making sure that things that we're purchasing as a city are, being very, very proactive in terms of reducing waste. And the new building requirements that I mentioned as well. Data collection and data maintenance, where we do want to see more of that. Of course, that is additional staff capacity and, upkeep needs. So that is going to be something that requires energy moving forward. In addition to behavior change and education, because when it comes to things like, as we learned with recycling, in terms of, any other kind of just handling of trash, composting as well is something that, requires behavior change in people. So it's not simply just saying, hey, we're doing this now, here's the information about it. It's really getting people to do that and take that change and initiative. So that's something that we're going to be looking at over the longer term to make sure that that's being facilitated. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the next section or any comments? I put
a question in the.
I apologize. I'm sharing screen. So if you wouldn't mind just saying it to me, that way I apologize. But in order to share the slides, I can't see the chat as well. Or if someone else could read those for us.
Sure. I just said, where are the wastewater facilities, like for sewage and?
There are a number in the
just
city.
not sure where they are.
There are a number in the city. There's one over like closer to the county on the east side. And then there's one over past Druid Hill Park, Ashburton area. Those are the two I know of off the top of my head. If anyone else knows of any others, but I do know of those two being some of the larger ones.
Thank you. I also really like the idea of, when they build new buildings, we're working on the electrical, make it electricity but I also like what you're saying about putting a place for compost recycling and, your trash. That's great.
Valerie, can I interrupt? This is Pat Boyle.
Yes, please. Yeah,
Department of
here's
Public
an
Works.
expert on where those facilities are.
Okay, the Back River Wastewater Treatment Plant is located in Essex, and it's city-owned property. It collects wastewater from Baltimore City and Baltimore County. The second wastewater treatment plant is the Patapsco Wastewater Treatment Plant, and it's located in Curtis Bay, and that collects Baltimore City, portions of Baltimore County, pieces of Howard County, and a little bit of Anne Arundel County. And pretty much the dividing line for the wastewater treatment plants is I use 795. So anything west of 795 goes to Patapsco, anything east goes to Back River. When Valerie mentioned Ashburton and Montebello, those are water treatment facilities, and they treat clean drinking water that goes into the distribution system.
Thank you so much, Pat.
We're going to hold any additional questions until the end of the presentations, just to be sensitive of the time. We know we have some speakers that have some time sensitivities. Valerie, for that. And so I'll share a little bit more detail about some of the actions that Valerie mentioned and where DPWs, or the city's Department of Public Works, Office of Waste Diversion, stands in implementing some of those goals. The Department of Public Works has an Office of Waste Diversion that covers a number of different activities, including waste diversion programming, food scrap drop-off location management, outreach engagement, and events that range in terms of how those events provide services, as well as educate folks about how they can reduce waste at home. And then there's some reporting and citywide plans that the Office of Waste Diversion manages as well. This is a relatively new office. It existed before as an administrative and kind of like research focused team. Then it was refocused to really dive deeper on that waste diversion topic. And around that time, a zero waste manager was also hired to lead that office, Sophia Hossein. So our friends in the Office of Waste Diversion unfortunately weren't able to join us this evening, so they did provide us information to share and updates to share with folks. So the next slide basically is an overview of how we, or the Office of Waste Diversion and DPW, is supporting these efforts across the city. One of the key things is really ensuring that people recycle right and understand what is recyclable and what is not. I know our the engagement team members in the Office of Waste Diversion have kind of like these trivia games where they pull out an item and ask you whether it's recyclable or which bin it goes into, and it's surprising how many people just don't know, and so they do try to provide very clear guidance. Oftentimes we can all engage in some form of wish cycling, but really when it comes to certain soiled materials, when it comes to carry-out food containers, plastic bags, as much as we wish we could put more items in our recycling bin, putting it in there can often serve as a source of contamination and making that process for recycling properly more challenging. Generally speaking, across the city, the recycling system takes single stream recycling items. So single stream meaning that all recycling material goes into a single container in your homes or in other public or private facilities. And the materials that are recycled include hard plastics, scrap metal. The DPW, they do collect household hazardous waste materials as well as electronics as well, within certain guidelines and parameters. So on the next slide, we just have, again, a list of the drop-off locations across the city. So shared kind of like the list of things that you can and cannot recycle. And this is a list of the locations across the city that DPW hosts where you can take those materials. They are open during general business hours. And we'll drop a link in the chat so you can see the operations for any one of these locations. Most people are probably closest to the Sisson Street drop-off center, where you can drop off everything from organics to recycling or other refuse items as long as you are a resident in the city. So for anyone that lives in the city and gets your waste collected by DPW sanitation workers, you know that recycling plays a really important role in a zero waste ecosystem or ways to divert waste across the city. The agency has released some new educational materials, trying to make that message really simple and straightforward. Clean it, contain it, and curb it. So when you're recycling, again, it's really important to stress the need of cleaning any recyclables. So items that are soiled with food or other materials oftentimes may not be recycled because then they are considered contaminated. Contain it, putting it in a receptacle in your home that works best for you, whatever that looks like, whether or not that's a plastic, not a plastic bag. Do not put your recycling in a plastic bag or a paper bag or a box or whatever container you have, like a laundry basket sitting around that works for that purpose, and making sure you curb it. You want to make sure you put your bin on the right part of the curb so that the sanitation team members do see it. The agency has also supported recently, or also allows for residents to drop off textiles. And so textiles will include anything that has a thread. So that's clothes, shoes, sheets, towels, household items, or other textiles can be taken to the different drop-off locations where you can, instead of having those materials end up in the landfill or the incinerator, have them recycled and repurposed for different populations that will reuse those materials. And definitely make sure you check out some of the recycling tools that our Department of Public Works provides. That includes a map where you can determine which day your recycling takes place on, depending on where you live. And there's also a really helpful recycling tool. We'll drop a link in the chat for that. That really lets you know how you can reuse, repurpose, upcycle, or recycle specific types of items that range from bags to furniture to water bottles. And so really helping people think through how to be more intentional stewards of that material. But obviously not taking away the need, or still acknowledging the need for there to be more stewardship of materials that sits in the private sector through a policy approach that's called extended producer responsibility. So on the next slide, we talk a little bit about school recycling that DPW supports. There is collection services done at different public and private schools in Baltimore City that the agency does support. And they provide services generally once per week. Schools will work directly with the agency on that. The food waste diversion team is also supporting, the waste diversion team is also supporting food waste diversion. A lot of this work was started in collaboration with the Natural Resources Defense Council through their Food Matters initiative. In a lot of really great educational materials were developed in that process, anchoring food waste issues to those issues related to food systems, climate justice, managing waste, creating soil, and really centering equity in that work. These are some more materials or educational items that have been produced while engaging with Food Matters, including these flyers and posters. We do have a Food Matters food waste reduction guide that is a pocket guide we do hand out at several different events across the city, and we have posters that you can see here. Valerie, if you can go to the next slide, folks can see some of the icons of the posters. We also, again, want to highlight the food scrap collection programs at the downtown and Waverly Farmers Market that Valerie mentioned. That's Jen Paul, one of the farmers who takes food scraps back to her hogs and sells that product at the farmers market. And on the next slide, you'll see, again, just as a mention of places or ways that you can divert your food waste. As a homeowner, as a resident, there is a pilot that the waste diversion team is supporting in collaboration with universities. This is going to be a temporary pilot, but right now residents have these 5 additional locations that you can drop your food scraps off at. In addition to the 5 convenience centers that residents can drop off at, as well as the 2 farmers markets. So 12 locations in total, apparently, for diverting food scraps. Some other engagement materials or ways that the office engages with the public includes their Beyond Zero Waste or Beyond Recycling, on the Road to Zero Waste newsletter that they release monthly. So to keep up to date about all things related to zero waste planning and ways that you can engage programs and services offered, definitely sign up for this newsletter. It's such a great resource, and the team does a really good job of distilling down all the amazing work that the agency is doing into how you can get engaged and what you can do to support that work. Some other outreach and engagement work that they're supporting is composting workshops at the growth centers. So I mentioned there's the fall and spring growth centers. So right now, the next growth center will be on the 19th, but through that process in partnership with the growth center team in DPW, there are also composting workshops that will be hosted. There are 4 shred events that the agency hosts every year. So if you have any sensitive documents, and Valerie, if you can go to the next slide, if you have any sensitive documents or materials that you want to get shredded in a safe and secure manner, you can bring those to these shred events at no cost to any city resident. And then there's also the collection of hazardous waste that happens the first Fridays during certain months of the year. Other outreach and engagement opportunities with the waste diversion team include a zero waste coalition that brings together stakeholders, residents, and institutions to more proactively tackle and address zero waste issues. There are also zero waste presentations that the team does. So if anyone's interested in that, we're happy to connect you all with our colleagues in the Waste Diversion Office of DPW. They provide those presentations to community organizations and schools. So if you work with youth and schools, definitely an opportunity to get some really great information and content out to targeted groups across the city. And I mentioned the growth centers collaboration. And lastly, the waste diversion team supports the implementation and development of citywide waste related plans. And so the most recent one being the 10-year solid waste management plan, which is a state mandated plan that all jurisdictions have to complete on a decennial basis. A few years ago, the agency also engaged in the Less Waste, Better Baltimore planning process, which released some data and analysis on where the city's waste system and municipal solid waste stands. And then there's some annual reporting that the department has to do, both for state and federal purposes, including the remediation of illegal dumping, but other annual reports that the agency supports. All right. So with that, I'll pass things back to Mia to hand it off to our next speaker.
I am not sure who's actually going next, so I apologize, Ava.
No problem. Spice, I'll go ahead and pass it to you. You are next with the zero waste priorities. So take it away, Spice.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I can't see everybody, but I am the chair of the Greater Baltimore group of the Sierra Club, and my one of the board members is here also, and he's the head of Zero Waste. I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview. We cover Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and Harford County, so it's a big swath of land that needs a lot of love. One of our main priorities this year is to work on the bottle bill, which would be a reusing as opposed to recycling law, which would mean that you could get money back. You pay initially a little more fee for your bottles, cans, and then when you return them, you would get money back. So that's really exciting. They already have bottle bills. Some of you might have even grown up in states that have bottle bills, like Massachusetts or Iowa or Oregon. And we think that it's overdue in Maryland. We also are helped a lot with the plastic bag bans, and they're still working on those in other counties, which is wonderful. We are our zero waste person for the state lives in Prince George's County, and they have one of the best compost facilities, I believe, in the state and even on the East Coast. So, and we're doing some touring of that. I'm going next week, as a matter of fact, and I think we might be able to get something going for some of the city council members. I know Ava's been talking to Martha, I believe, about that, and she's from Prince George's County. And Angela also Brooks was part of, helping the compost go in Prince George's County, which is really exciting. We're also working against synthetic turf, which is made by tires, and it's a major toxic pollutant, and our children are playing games on this toxic pollutant, these fields. So we're working, those are some of the things, and I think I'm going to pass it on to Rob Freer.
Hello, everybody. Hope you can hear me. I'm going to follow up on some of the things that Spice mentioned. If you can't hear me, somebody shout or let me know, because I have no way of telling. Yeah, to follow up on some of the things that Spice mentioned, the plastic bag bill that passed in Baltimore City and came into effect a couple years ago has been extremely effective. It's actually been, we can actually measure the effectiveness. The Waterfront Partnership does a dumpster dive every year, and they segregate all the trash that they pick up. And there's actually data on like the reduction in plastic bags. So it's been an incredible success. We like to call those bills, instead of plastic bag ban, we like to call it bring your own bag bill, because the idea is to incentivize people to bring their own bags. We don't really necessarily want people to take paper instead of plastic, although paper is better. But the idea is to bring your own bag, and that's the point of having a small fee. We have one little issue with the city. It ended up being very effective, the Baltimore City bag bill, but has a little flaw in it, in that it does allow thicker film plastic bags. In practice, most of the stores are not providing those because they're a little more expensive. California had that in place for many years, and they finally got rid of it. So basically, no film plastic bags. So, and in the county, we got that through without any film plastic bags, no thickness standard. So ideally, it would be nice if the city council would improve that bill, but in practice, it has been really effective. Our big priority for the state, and it has to be, the bag bills are now like almost throughout Maryland, all the major counties and all kinds of smaller jurisdictions. So it's basically we're going county by county, and then hopefully in 2026 we can get a statewide bill. The bottle deposit bill, by definition, needs to be statewide. A city or a county can't do a bottle deposit bill because it adds a fee to every beverage container sold, ideally like a 10-cent fee. So everybody, if the drink was going to cost $2, it would cost $2.10. And it's pretty much transparent. If you go to a bottle bill state, you don't really necessarily notice that. But it has an incredible effect because that deposit does two things. One, people can get their money back by bringing their bottles back to a redemption center, which will be at convenient locations and at retail stores, and they can actually get their money back. They can get their 10 cents back, or bring 10 of them back and get $1 back. The other thing is that it's an incredible anti-litter bill, because if by chance, not that anyone would ever drop a bottle on the street in Baltimore City, but if that happens, if that happens, somebody will come along and scoop that up and earn 10 cents. And actually, there'll be people that are, dragging around huge, shopping carts and filling them up with litter, basically, and getting money for it. And it's actually like a little bit of a cottage industry in some states. And they'll also go through like the trash cans and pull out bottles that were inadvertently put in trash and not in recycling. So the recycle rate, the redemption rate of bottles in Maryland, in Maryland, I would ask you to guess, but it's too inconvenient to do this in this format, but it's a lot. More than 5 billion beverage containers are sold in Maryland every year, more than 5 billion. and the rate at which the bottles are returned for recycling, to the extent that they actually get recycled, but that are returned in an organized way through the recycling stream, is about 25% in Maryland. The rest of it, where does it go? Landfill, incineration, or straight into the harbor. So the redemption rate with a 10-cent fee or a 15-cent deposit would go from 25% to close to 90%. And in addition to that, not only are we getting all those bottles back, but the bottles that come back through a bottle bill are actually cleaner and less contaminated and more likely to be recycled. We actually have pictures of like non-bottle bill bottles and bottle bill bottles, and they're cleaner. So it's a phenomenal thing. Last year we tried to get it through, we got close, and the mayor did endorse it, and we would like the mayor to endorse it, and we'd like the city council to endorse it. As the more endorsements we can get from jurisdictions, the more likely we are to pass in the state. Of course, the Senate president lives in Baltimore City, and the speaker lives in the county. So that is something Sierra Club is leading the coalition of more than 20 environmental groups this year for trying to move that bottle bill to law finally, bottle deposit bill. So that's the big thing statewide we're working on. We did get a paint stewardship bill through last year, and you may or may not be aware of it, but starting in 2026, people can bring paint back to I think there'll be more than 100 redemption centers in the state, and so paint can be properly disposed of and not go into landfill or incineration, which is obviously awful, and that's funded by the industry. And the bottle bill also is a self-funding thing because the deposits that don't get redeemed can fund the program. We're also working on a mattress stewardship program to get mattresses back, a post-consumer waste requirement, post-consumer recycling material content. I know I said that wrong, but that plastic materials would have a certain percentage of post-consumer content in them, so recycled material. Trying to get that through this year. Synthetic turf, Spice mentions, is a big issue. It's plastic, and they're huge. They're toxic. They leach and everything else, and then 8 years later they become waste, and they're huge. And it's a huge amount of waste, and they're also dangerous. And maybe no stories that actually a student somewhere in Maryland died from the heat. So we're working on that. And that's mostly what we're working on. As far as composting, as Spice mentioned, there's a tour of the Prince George's County Composting Center next Wednesday, October 23rd, 10 p.m. And if you're interested, you can attend. We can get a link through to
10 a.m.
10 a.m. 10 a.m. Yeah. Wednesday, October 23rd, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Upper Marlboro. So it's a little bit of a trek. The Prince George's County is a very, very impressive composting facility. There's also a composting facility in Howard County that's also impressive. I think it's a little less sophisticated and probably therefore less expensive. So at some point it might be worth like city, evaluating both of those options for a potential city composting center. And I mentioned the Waterfront Partnership. They're having their dumpster dive on November 16th if you want to participate. And I think that's what I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
So-
Thank you.
Next up, we have
Oh, there's
Clean Water Action.
Yes, I am ready to take it away, if that is correct. Great. Well, thanks so much, everybody. Good to see you. My name is Jennifer Kunze. I'm the Maryland Organizing Director with Clean Water Action, and I live in East Baltimore in McElderry Park. And I'm going to bounce off of Robin Spice and talk about a couple of other state priorities that we're really hoping that the Commission is going to support this year, as well as some city planning items. Can I screen share? Great, good. There's two big state bills that Clean Water Action has been working on with partners for a number of years, and the Commission's voice in support of would be very powerful at least one of these I know the commission has weighed in support of in years past. So the first one is the Reclaim Renewable Energy Act. If you've been involved with the commission for longer than a year, you've probably heard me or somebody else speak about this before. This is, and hopefully this will be the last time, because this will be the 8th year in a row that this legislation has been before the General Assembly. But this has to do with trash incineration and how it is treated by Maryland's renewable energy programs. Because unfortunately, since 2011, Maryland's Renewable Portfolio Standard, which is one of the big state programs for supporting renewable energy and transitioning Maryland's grid, has considered trash incineration renewable energy. So that means that it siphons subsidies away from truly renewable energy like wind and solar. And because it's getting these energy subsidies, it's giving it a competitive advantage in the waste market that it does not deserve. So the Reclaim Renewable Energy Act, simple bill, strikes trash incineration out of that renewable energy category. And this is a really well-supported and incredibly well-studied issue. All the way back in 2017, the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, the General Assembly commissioned them to do a report about the RPS as a whole. And they found that the RPS was not being very effective, in part because it included trash incineration as a renewable energy source, when that made it basically on par with the grid. With trash incineration in the mix, on average, the renewable energy sources in this program were about on par with the grid in terms of emissions on several different emissions categories. So that's really troubling. This has also been a really well-studied issue across the country. Here's a national report that came out this year, peer-reviewed, that found that trash incinerators emit more greenhouse gas emissions per unit of energy produced than literally any other power source, including coal, and actually more criteria air pollutants that harm people's health than sources of energy that would replace them. And then finally, just to get a picture of the kind of money that we're talking about here, here's a chart of over the past 3 years, and we should actually be getting the 2023 data within the next month or so. But within the past 3 years up to 2022, we're talking about $51 million total being wasted on subsidizing trash incinerators that could have been going to real renewable energy. And a lot of attention gets paid on BRESCO. And the reason why I'm here is that the General Assembly has made it very clear that they want to hear from Baltimore City government about this issue. But BRESCO actually gets the smallest amount of the subsidy. Much more goes to the incinerator in Montgomery County, and then much more again goes to an out-of-state incinerator in Wharton, Virginia. That, like Baltimore, is in an environmental justice community. So finally, this is in various state climate action plans. This is something that city government has supported in the past. And passing this bill would do Baltimore City a lot of good. The fact that city residents are forced to subsidize the trash incinerator that's polluting the air we breathe as clean, renewable energy is just a huge environmental injustice and really a slap in the face to all of the communities that have been fighting to transition away from the incinerator for so long. And the incinerator getting these subsidies makes it more competitive against alternatives. So taking away these subsidies, passing the Reclaim Renewable Energy Act won't cause a crisis in terms of it won't immediately shut the incinerator down, but right-sizing that market and right-sizing the incinerator's profit margins to what they actually should have been all along instead of all this extra is a part of the transition that needs to be made, and especially considering the private hauling market and how that's impacted by the rates that they get charged. Making sure that this bill passes at the front end, or at this point in the middle of Baltimore City trying to transition away from the trash incinerator is really, really necessary. So that is bill number 1. Bill number 2 is on the solution side. So no longer talking about what we're trying to transition away from, but what we're trying to transition to. So this is legislation that this will be, I believe, the 3rd year it will be introduced, 3rd time's the charm, to create a wasted food reduction and diversion fund and grant programs that would come out of that to bolster food waste diversion and then composting programs. And this is also a really well-studied and well-supported bill. There's been various state government and other state plans that have called for a fund and a mechanism like this to be instated. And we know from all of the grant applications that have gone in from across the state to federal grant programs that there is tremendous unmet demand for more funding to build more compost facilities and create more compost programs. And so what does this bill do? How would it work? So this would create a new revenue stream for compost funding by charging a $2 per ton surcharge on any waste disposed of at an incinerator, a landfill, or that is supposed to say transfer station, not incinerator twice. Apologies. And that's a really nominal fee that's actually less than the similar surcharge charged by other states in the country. Pennsylvania, for example, has a $6 per ton surcharge that goes to similar purposes. And where these funds would go in Maryland, 50% of the funds would, the current draft of the bill, it's not 100% locked down yet. We're still working on it. But the current draft of the bill is that 50% of funds would go directly back to the local governments that need them. And then remaining funds would be distributed among on-farm composting, school composting, and then general community and business composting and food waste reduction needs. So this will be really a necessary program that we need to get off the ground. We hope that the commission is going to be willing to support. And then finally, just a very quick word about city planning. We've also been focusing a lot on composting inside of the city, really looking forward to that first compost facility finally being online, and especially looking forward to diverting Baltimore City's yard waste from the trash incinerator, because unfortunately, and Baltimore City is the only jurisdiction in Maryland that does this, Baltimore City's yard waste is not collected separately at scale from the rest of our trash, and the bulk of it goes to be burned at the trash incinerator, which is obviously very counterproductive, both for our zero waste transition that we need to make, and even for the city budget. Baltimore City pays per ton for waste that we send to the trash incinerator. And that means that we're paying Bresco more than $2 million per year just for the yard waste that we're sending there to be burned. We should be spending that money on setting up separate collection and composting programs instead. And this is a significant amount of waste. It's, according to some public records requests that we've done, it's about 8% of the total trash being burned at Bresco, not just the trash from Baltimore City, but overall, is the yard waste from Baltimore City. So Councilman Dorsey has introduced legislation that had a public hearing back in June to expand the pre-existing ban that's been on the books for years and years and years on sending yard waste to the Quarantine Road landfill, apply that to the trash incinerator as well, so that we have a deadline, and hopefully a near-term deadline, to stop burning our yard waste. And as part of that, I'll just add, we're hoping to see in the city budget for the capital budget to really accelerate spending on compost facilities and really prioritize that, which unfortunately over the past couple of years has been deprioritized over time, which is not what we want to see. I'll wrap it up there because I know we're short on time, but really hoping that the commission is able to support the Reclaim Renewable Energy Act, the Wasted Food Reduction and Diversion Fund and grant programs. Sorry, that's a mouthful. We need to come up with a nice name for it. Councilman Dorsey's city legislation to ban the incineration of yard waste, And then really taking a look at the capital budget process, which is starting up really soon, and making sure that we're prioritizing very near-term spending on constructing the volume of compost facilities we need in the city. So I will stop there, and thank you guys so much for your time.
Thanks, Jennifer. I appreciate it. We're going to do a quick switch to our program here and hear from Shannon McDonald, who's the Natural Resource Planner with MDE, and she'll share a little bit about Maryland waste diversion, food waste, residuals, and extended producer responsibility. And Jennifer, before you go, would you mind emailing us your presentation so that we can share it later with the commission?
I'll both do that and put it in the chat, and I'll have the
Thank you.
citations in the notes.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Shannon,
I'm sorry.
it's all you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just trying to pull up the share the content, and for whatever reason, it is not letting me share it. So Ava, I sent it to you, the presentation to you. Do you mind pulling that up for me? And thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to speak. So my name is Shannon McDonald. I'm with the Maryland Department of the Environment. I'm part of the Waste Diversion Division. My specific role at the state is to support our food residual diversion law, recycling market development, and I also am the person responsible for the solid waste infrastructure for recycling work plan that was executed by the state under the Swiffer grant. So the Baltimore City was provided funding for one activity that was competitive, and each state was given funding to do analysis, and that is what I'm responsible for at the state. And I have a quick presentation, so this shouldn't be too much for you all. So Ava, you can go to the next one. So in case anyone does not have the background associated with the Maryland Recycling Act, the act itself was passed in 1989, and it has a lot of different layers to it. So things like banning separately collected yard waste disposal at solid waste acceptance facilities. I know we just heard that little piece of it here, but it's separately collected. That was passed in 1994. The requirement for schools to have recycling available to them passed in 2010. Permitting private natural wood waste facilities, recycling at certain types of events and publicly operated facilities. So there's a lot to the Maryland Recycling Act, but the thing that is most important and most interesting is the requirement that each of the 24 political jurisdictions has to develop and implement a recycling program. Within that, there's a mandated recycling rate. Those rates include things like organics, plastics, metals. There's like a whole bunch of different categories, and that helps to sum it up. It includes both residential and any operating business, industrial activity happening within the within that political jurisdiction for those totals. And Baltimore City's is at 35%. If it does not meet that requirement, then the state has the ability to stop work for some activities if they don't meet that rate. The next slide, please. So while that is the Maryland Recycling Act, we also set in 2017 an executive order requiring the state to set sustainable materials management goals. And those were the goals that were put together here. So you can see the 2035 targets. And this is where we are at as of our last annual presentation and our annual report for the whole state. So this is a whole state 2035 target for food scraps diversion at 60%, and we're hovering around 25%. We do know, and I will go into this in a minute, that those numbers are going to significantly increase based on the food residual diversion law. But as you see here with glass, we're kind of like meeting those diversion rates across the state. Same thing with metal. Paper products, we'd really like to increase that, and I think that we're going to see a jump in that as well based on the requirements of the food residual diversion law. The next slide, please. And that's what I'm going to go over is Maryland's food residual law and regulation. So there's two pieces to this. The law requires that if you generate 1 ton, so 2,000 pounds or more a week of food residuals, that's pre and post consumer materials, and you are not a standalone restaurant, and you are not a collection of the entire school system, so you meet those, and you're not a residence, like you're not individual residents, then the mandate would be applicable if there is an organics recycler within 30 miles that has the willingness and capability to accept for processing of those materials. It does, and there's an asterisk there, because it does not mandate that you, as the person that generates this food residuals, send it to that facility within 30 miles. In fact, we hope that you will keep it somewhat closer and divert materials differently. But it's your choice. And, interstate commerce is alive and well in Maryland, and we want to ensure that each business has the opportunity to choose what they would like to do. Now, the regulation kicks in and it says you must report, if the mandate is applicable to you, your political jurisdiction at the end of that calendar year, the totals recycled, including materials that are not part of the food residual diversion law. Now, we don't mandate that you have to recycle as a business, but if you are recycling, and many businesses are, a lot of them are, again, there are a lot of paper products, corrugated cardboard, that total counts towards the political jurisdiction in which that facility is operating. So like I said, I think our numbers are going to go significantly up. And I say that based off of visiting these facilities throughout the past 2 years and seeing how much material they generate in the back of house and getting that information reported. So a lot of people are wondering, where are these generators? The EPA created an excess food opportunities map. I've kind of just shown a screenshot to illustrate where that is in Baltimore City. The accuracy of this, not really. And I say that in the respect of, this was generated by EPA numbers. It's from data that's kind of old. If we really dive deep into some of these places, I've gone to visit them because I'm like, oh man, that's a really high number. I should go check out the facility. And then I go there and I'm like, this is not accurate at all. So that's part of the education and outreach that the Department of Environment is responsible for when we're doing our compliance and enforcement, is checking to see how valid some of these existing data points are and how we can, continue into the future to figure out who needs to learn this information. So going to meet those individual businesses, those waste generators, and talking to them about where they can, either divert their materials for recovery or for recycling, and throughout the city and the state. The next slide is about generation. We get this question a lot. If anyone here is part of a business that potentially would be mandated to determine applicability, every person who's required to divert materials must do an assessment. So that's a mandate no matter what. If you don't meet the requirement to divert, that's fine. You just have to do the assessment. How you do the assessment, and that's that idea that if you're not wanting to divert, you would have to prove to us that you are not mandated to do so. So if we do an inspection on your facility and we're like, whoa, you are definitely generating more than a ton here a week, they would have to illustrate that, and that would help in the compliance piece. I'm talking a lot right now with the Hotel Association because they're really confused on how this is applicable to them. I do not expect someone to go room to room in a hotel and clean through and sort out the materials in each hotel room. It would probably be against a health code violation, but regardless, if I myself wouldn't do that and feel comfortable doing that, I wouldn't expect someone to. We're talking about these large generation areas, so where they're serving meals, where they're prepping meals, and offering that type of food, or if they decided to change over a vendor and they're no longer selling these materials, where can we divert those large masses of materials? Next slide, sorry, Eva. Here's a map. I mean, I update this all the time. Those are basically where there's organic facilities within 30 miles. You can go to the MDE website and click on there, and you'll see each of the individual permanent facilities and non-permanent facilities. But again, this is just to illustrate, we do have quite a significant amount of infrastructure within the state that's permitted, and non-permitted facilities that are under the 5,000 square foot threshold are out there as well, like your community composters, which are not necessarily always listed on here, but we do provide a list of haulers on the MDE website. Sorry, Eva, go ahead. And then again, I'm trying to capitalize on the reduction, right? Illustrating to different businesses where these case studies that illustrate how you yourself can save money by not generating the waste in the first place, and then reducing that overall generation of materials. But then ultimately, I would really like for people to donate edible, servable foods. When we talk about those terms, wasted food, food waste, food scraps, if I hear food waste, I think garbage, and I think a lot of folks do as well. So we want to say, it was wasted food if it was edible and could be servable, and if it's food scraps that could be recycled and either sent for animal feed or to an organic soil amendment like composting or anaerobic digestion. And all of these embedded links, which Amy will be able to share, have links to where you can go and find a little bit more information. Again, you're required to report. We do provide information on what's considered reporting. How can you provide that information? We give a link that you can put this information to for the state. But we also say if you're a larger food generator, like their grocery stores, if they just want to send us a list and we can send it out individually, that happens a lot as well. But again, this is where I think we're going to see a big uptick as we've done a lot of compliance in the past year to support people on the education and the outreach of this. What they're going to, what the numbers are really going to start to flow in as far as what is being recycled throughout the state. And I just have, I think, 2 more slides. Yeah, so this is a repeat. I don't know why. So we'll just move on to the next one. We have a guidance document that's available too that asks a lot of questions. So the next one is if you go to the next slide, sorry, Ava.
Last one, Shannon. Oh, okay. There we go.
What materials matter? So a lot of the work and scope that we're doing right now is figuring out where there's reuse markets and where there are materials management markets. So working with these larger entities that use single-use products, if they can potentially switch or convert over to reusable, because then that can create a bigger market for employment and it will reduce the waste long-term. And it's also a fiscal opportunity to save, both in public and private, especially in the food service wares, but again, also in your bulky materials like your furnitures and whatnot, where you have the opportunity to reuse and rescue those materials. And if you're not aware of the mdrecycles.org website, I would highly recommend checking that out. And if you do come across a business you would like to add there, please send them my way. We would like to, again, divert as many textiles, as many electronics, paints, etc., moving forward. And that was a very quick summary. I know I went through that really quickly. My information is listed here. I am available. I'm a public servant. I'm available to anyone that has questions about this at any time. I'm very passionate about it. And if you have any questions relative to recycling markets, reused markets, or the food residual diversion law, I'm happy to answer those questions.
Thanks, Shannon. I really appreciate it. Next up, we're going to have Elizabeth Main from the University of Maryland, Baltimore, with the waste minimization and food rescue.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. All right. 1 second. With multiple windows up. All right. So good afternoon, evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Main. I'm the Director of Sustainability and Special Projects at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. And I have with me Meredith Dioya, who is a sustainability specialist. We're going to kind of tag team this presentation. And of course, at any point, if you have questions, we're happy to take them. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background about our office. We were founded in 2021, so a relatively new sustainability office in the higher ed scene. We are focused on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions in support of our overarching goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. The asterisk is there because, as you are probably familiar with the Climate Solutions Now Act, that goal has now been bumped up to 2045. We are facilities focused, but we do work with departments and offices across the university to execute the university's mission through the lens of sustainability. And again, while the overarching goal of our office is carbon neutrality and greenhouse gas reduction, waste is the most visible part of the work that we do. It's something that everyone on our campus can connect with, whereas some of the tenets of energy conservation and reduction are a little less tangible. So we're just going to highlight a few waste-related initiatives on our campus, but we talked about the MRA earlier, so maybe don't need to do this slide, but just so you all know, we actually report as the University System of Maryland. So it's our university, College Park, Towson, UMBC, UBalt, all of those institutions actually report as one agency. So our recycling rates are averaged. In 2022, the university system achieved a rate of 34.76. We achieved a rate of just over 19% in 2023. So unfortunately, we are currently bringing the average down, but some of the things we're going to talk about are ways that we are trying to bring it back up. So first, on the waste minimization side, this was the largest project we undertook and also by far the least popular with building occupants. So we removed all desk side trash and recycling bins from our 36 campus buildings and put centralized waste stations throughout office spaces. We had slightly differing setups for labs versus offices. So the labs are often very cluttered and there's not a lot of room. So instead of the triple bin station, we used a dual bin station. And this project also entailed us standardizing all of our signage to help prevent confusion. So if someone, went from one campus building to another, they would be seeing the same messaging. So just a few stats about the impact that's had. The number of individual trash cans we collected was close to 3,000, and that translates roughly to saving about 775,000 liners, plastic liners annually. I don't need to tell you all about the statistic on the slide about plastic liners, but this was a big push for this project was, using that statistic, using those estimates, and really having people try to connect with how their waste is being processed at the Wheelabrator incinerator right down the road, and make more conscious choices when they go to the centralized waste stations to dispose of their waste throughout the day. I also wanted to mention a Green Labs program. So while this isn't solely waste focused, like I mentioned, we do have a lot of research labs on our campus. And so this is a program that labs can enroll in to make small changes, whether that be energy, purchasing waste. We have 6 labs that have been certified under that program. And some of the waste related credits that are in the program are, purchasing products from vendors who minimize their packaging waste, utilizing our excess property process to sell, equipment or furniture or other things that they no longer need. So this is waste is a big component of the Green Labs program that I wanted to highlight. We also have our own internal Buy Nothing group. So you all may be familiar with neighborhood Buy Nothing groups. We started one on our campus for people to share basically any items that they no longer need and don't want to throw away. So I just took a couple screenshots of someone posting something that they were getting rid of and then someone posting something they were looking for. And in both cases ended up with matching partners, which is great.
And then I can take it from here. As Elizabeth said, I'm sustainability specialist at the Office of Sustainability. And so something recently that we've come out with is a swag guideline and lab purchasing guidelines. So students love swag. It's something we kind of can't avoid to get them interested in our office and to come visit us when we're tabling, which many other offices and departments across the university can sympathize with. So we created a purchasing guideline, which has some key questions to ask that, like, is swag truly necessary to achieve your goals? Is there something you possibly could replace it with? And then it also includes a hierarchy for you to consider with to prioritize the swag that you're buying with experiences at the top, then upcycle and reuse, and then considering if it's useful and ethical, or useful or ethical is underneath that. And then the last one is useless and questionable. And we have examples for each of those so people can hopefully get their brain started to come up with ideas for themselves. And then the lab purchasing guidance helps people know what to look for when it comes to certifications or labels on equipment they're looking to buy, and then also how to read certain labels like the ACT label, which is Accounting Consistency and Transparency label. And yes, the purchasing guide, sorry, I just saw that, is online, and we can put the resource in the chat after this. And then Elizabeth, next slide, please, sorry. And then for food waste, we have a couple of initiatives. As previously mentioned, we are part of the composting drop-off pilot with DPW, and it's been really successful in our locations. We've really enjoyed it. So have the West Baltimore communities that have participated at our Community Engagement Center, and the students, faculty, and staff that have participated at our campus center. So we've collected over 10,000 pounds of food scraps and then had over 300 drop-offs. And I didn't put it on the slide, but we've also hosted a couple of composting workshops at the Community Engagement Center for community members to attend. And then next slide, please. Thank you. And then we also have UMB Free, which was kickstarted by students, which allows students to sign up with their email address and fill out a food liability form, where event planners will fill out if they have leftover food for an event, what food is left over, dietary restrictions, how much longer it'll be out for, location, anything like that. And then students will get that alert through their email, and they'll be able to go grab some free food while also reducing the food waste.
Great, thank you. And we're going to start using the language of wasted food. I like that because this is food that could be eaten. Also just wanted to highlight a couple other resources that we've developed. So we have a Green Eats map. It's both a GIS map and then also I just took a screenshot on the left-hand side of the graphic. So we took businesses that were classified as local vendors within 2 miles of our campus through our Community Engagement Center, and we basically asked them different questions about their offerings. So plant-based offerings, offering food in bulk rather than individual containers. Do they have compostable, plates, cups, forks, etc., and about their local sourcing. So we kind of have a grid that shows all of the offerings for those restaurants that are within 2 miles of our campus. And then we also have a guide, again, a little screenshot on the right, and this is all on our website as well, about hosting low waste events. So we kind of split the guide into things that are good, things that are better, and things that are the best, knowing that each event will be a little bit different in what they're able to accommodate. So we have one of those for small events and one for large, because obviously, hosting an office meeting with 10 people will look a lot different than hosting, commencement at the end of the year. So that is just a snippet of what we're doing on the waste and food waste or wasted food reduction efforts. We put our different ways to stay in touch with us on here. So social media, sustainability@umaryland.edu is our general account that both Meredith and I read, and our website. But if there are any specific resources you're interested in having the links to, we can definitely put those in the chat, share those afterwards. So.
That's fantastic. Thanks everyone for sharing all of the information. I wanted to open it up to questions to see if any commissioners had questions on any of the information that had been presented. If anyone, there weren't a lot of questions in chat. I'm glad that the swag guideline is there because a lot of people want swag on campus or off. And so that's always a great resource, I think, for everyone to have, as well as the event guidance. It's a really great thing. Jared, do you have any questions? You might not have questions.
No, I actually don't. This was all very informative.
Fantastic. I know that we've been joined by other commissioners. So Nicolette is on, Stephanie is on, so we can make sure that they are recorded there. Do we have any questions from commissioners about any of the information that's been presented? We will have access to all of the presentations later to be able to share and kind of refer back to as we get ready to create our own legislative agendas and look at, as a body, at what we will be able to support and move forward. But I just wanted to take a moment to open it up here.
All great presentations. Thank you to everyone who came to our commission meeting today. Way back in the chat somewhere, I put in that I don't think we have one, a deconstruction ordinance. So this is if you have to take down a building that you can't just, I mean, recycling, construction and demo waste is great, but wouldn't it be even better if it's deconstructed and those building materials can be reused? So I don't know if anyone knows that if that has been submitted in the past through Baltimore City Council. And just last year, maybe a year and a half ago, there was one passed in San Antonio, and I put in the link for an example of how they did it, if useful.
Lisa, I think that we're going to have to do some research to see if there is anything like that on the books, and get back to the commission.
I'll just share that there has been talk of a deconstruction ordinance or legislation for quite some time. It hasn't been introduced, and so I think we'll see it during the next administration and the next council, kind of like what happens there.
Any other questions? Well, hearing none, this is part one of a series of our next few months where we will be discussing plans and programs that are geared towards the Climate Action Plan and showing the connection to both the Climate Action Plan as well as the existing Sustainability Plan. Next month, we'll be discussing transportation, and we also have on before us as a body looking at plans that have been presented to us by other organizations, and being able to have a process in place so that we can provide kind of a stamp of approval or looking at all of the different elements. And so that's why this agenda was put together with that in mind, looking at what University of Maryland, Baltimore is doing and what other places have done and what policies are in place with both the state and the city. So wanted to share that and wanted to see if there are any other questions about that. We did just receive a little feedback from commissioners, but in light of what's been presented today, I wanted to see if there were any other questions about that. I'll just sit in uncomfortable silence for about 15 more seconds.
Sure. And just to link that back to some actual plans that have come across the commission's desk, we've been asked to review the Johns Hopkins University Sustainability Plan, as well as the aquarium. Is that correct? National Aquarium.
Yes. So since there's such a robust conversation here, I would like to just let everyone know that our next meeting will be held on November 20th from 4 to 7. It'll be right here on WebEx. And we'll be sending information out ahead of time for commissioners so that you can be prepared to know what our agenda will be. As Amy has placed in chat, the video from this meeting will be added and uploaded to the website and to YouTube, and we will make sure that the presentations are available as well. If there are no other questions, then I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. So
Actually,
thank you all.
Just before I second that, I wanted to remind everyone that we will be doing a commissioner briefing next month related to the theme of transportation. If anybody has anything pertinent to share based on transportation, please reach out to me. I'll drop my email in the chat. Or if they have any specific questions about transportation or things that they would like to know more about transportation in Baltimore City, please let me know, and we can do a little research project and present to the commission. That's all I have. I second the motion to adjourn.
Thanks, everyone.